All right, good. So bad news is we're behind. Good news is I will take you safely to the break. I'm GeorgeNazi. I am with Accenture, leading on global network services. And today we're going to talk about migration to the software-defined infrastructure. And actually, in this discussion, I want to cover 6 factors that I think are extremely important in this journey. So most of us as service providers, and based on my colleagues, what they said before and yesterday, we know that it's very important to move to an integrated digital service provider. You know, the customers, the consumers with wearables and technology are all pulling in from a digital experience, digital capability, next generation of kids and next generation of students are coming up with new ideas on how to leverage this technology. They're using the bandwidth more and more, so we know it's a must to evolve it. On one hand, we know that it's very important to create this dynamic network, this on-demand network. On the other hand, we have invested as operators tens of millions, many decades on this network and infrastructure that we have built. The clients are happy with the service. It's fairly profitable. And now we're saying we need to migrate. So we know this is disruptive. It's disruptive to some of the clients. It's disruptive to the business models. We are competing with new business environments, over-the-tops coming in, monetization model that's different. The business model is different. Which is why I am saying, you know, there are certain factors that we have to take into consideration. At the same time, the other thing I would like to say, that this is not just a technology challenge. This is actually much more about a business challenge. If it's a technology, and the fact that we're moving from networks to software-defined networks and the intelligence is moving into SDN and NFV, we kind of have cracked this code before. In the industry, in the IT industry, we've seen it going from hosted mainframes into PCs, into data centers, into cloud. That same transformation we have done. We do it day in, day out. That complexity we have cracked. At least Accenture is day in, day out in that business. Even in the network business, we've seen that transformation from ATM, frame relay to IP. We've seen some of these disruptions. Except this one is a little bit much more major in the network space, but it's very similar to what happened in the IT space. But before I talk about the 6 factors, actually I want to use an anecdote. Guy Kawasaki, the technology evangelist from Silicon Valley, uses this anecdote. He said, 100 years ago, there used to be an industry around ice harvesting. So people will go and chip on the ice, take the ice, sell it all the way to the consumers that wanted to use the ice. They optimized that process. They had it down to a T. They were able to be very efficient in taking the ice from chipping it, and they used many people in order to do this. And they were innovating ideas even within their process on how to do this. And as they were busy doing this, in a matter of a decade or two, somebody came up with an ice factory. So suddenly, some people jumped the bandwagon or knew ahead and they jumped. Others were stragglers saying, what are we going to do? How do we retrain? Maybe I should build a factory. I'll be a fast follower. Let me do this. And these guys, as they were doing this, and again, they were innovating within these factories, thinking about how do I do this? You know, somebody else came up with the idea of refrigerators. Suddenly, you don't need an ice factory. That is the kind of transformation we are seeing. That's the kind of journey we are seeing. Let me cover the 6 factors. Some of them have already been covered in the previous 2 sessions, but I'm going to highlight them one at a time. So the first one is we talk about software-defined networks. We talk about the fact that the intelligence was in the hardware. We buy a router, we buy a switch, the intelligence was embedded. Now we're saying we're going to take that intelligence, we're going to create a software-defined controller, and we're going to control that hardware, as much as possible as an x86 hardware. So it's not proprietary anymore. There's no proprietary ASICs as much as possible. And it's going to move into software. That network now is in software. We talked about the access. It will be ubiquitous. It will be combination between 5G, fiber, copper, coax, satellites, drones, other ideas, balloons. But it will be federated. And now the network is in software. That is an important factor here on how do you migrate. And what's important is, historically, our products and services were also vertically integrated. So we need to decouple from our products to our OSS, BSS, to our network from within the operator on how we're able to absorb these APIs, this SDN, these NFVs that we want to onboard in order to provide these capabilities at that layer. So that we need to think about as we're onboarding to the journey about how do we do this. That's an important factor about this capability. The second one is we also leveraged the vendors a lot. We worked on within that box, that ASIC, what is your roadmap? 6 months from now, 8 months from now, I'll start developing it now. Here's my specification. We were extremely waterfall. And now we're moving into an agile environment. And here what's important is be careful as well not to lock yourself into the same problem of the past, which means you're locking yourself back into a monolithic vendor when really now the innovation is coming from multiple vendors. You hear some of the big operators naming suppliers that we've never heard before. They're using these APIs, they're orchestrating them, they're cataloging them, and now they're saying they can create an on-demand service much more agile than any other service they would do traditionally, because now they're adopting that model, the agile model. So selecting your ecosystem of suppliers becomes very important. That system integration of the APIs, again, becomes very important. So now that you have moved the intelligence from the hardware to the software, you have selected your ecosystem, and your network is in the cloud, now your capability can go beyond than your regional capability. Now that service that you can provide to the consumer or the enterprise at the edge can be something that could be dynamically provisioned and available anywhere in the world beyond that boundary because you're running that network in the cloud. That also becomes very important on how you think of your product set. What is the product set? How do I enable my ecosystem in order to do this, and I'm not locked in? And am I locked in to my private network, to my private data center, or can I go open? Because now if I'm open, I am federating across multiple clouds, and I've built in my security within that capability based on that open environment, so I can provide that service anywhere, anytime, to any device. I am combining it with my ecosystem. So instead of competing, maybe with the Netflix, the others in the world, the other OTTs, I can either bundle or I can federate my APIs to create new products and propositions. Very digital, facing the consumer, which is what they want, in a dynamic network based on an open capability. Now, the fifth thing that's important as you do this is you also want to be able to change the workforce, give them, train them, and give a network academy so that, as we said earlier, you are not just innovating within, you're making them move to the next step. So there's a capability, that we can provide, let's say, as a network academy, to train our people, because it's very difficult. It's already difficult enough to find many IP engineers. And now think of that. Those IP engineers need to understand software, API, programming, JavaScript, and they need to also understand network operations. We call these unicorns. I don't know. They don't exist that much. But it's important because now we can leverage and train. Our people already have an embedded knowledge base. We can train them and help them based on the target operating model of where you want to be, what are the skill sets you need, and ensure now, based on that environment, that network that's in the cloud, that network that instead of managing it at 5 nines, now you're managing it at the application layer, which is totally different. That resilience concept is different because now you're like a Google. When you do a search, you're able to get that result, and that's what's these digital capabilities need to be at the edge. It's a different culture, it's a different methodology, and it's a different capability. That is very important. Now, finally, I've been walking around talking to many operators. Initially, when you start talking about software-defined networks, the intelligence moving into software, the OTTs, this is what they're doing. They're taking much more of the margin. Their monetization model is different. Some quickly say, so am I a dumb pipe? No, don't allow yourself to be a dumb pipe. It's OK if you want to end up being just a wholesale provider, which is fine by design. But if you follow the first 5 factors that I discussed, and you're really now creating that digital capability to the consumer, you're moving your network and expanding it into the cloud, your product set is something the consumers, the enterprises want, and it's digital from an experience and a capability through digital. Not just digital on the interface, but you're able to really dynamically get that bandwidth on demand based on the capabilities of SDN and FVO and what you've onboarded. You don't have to pigeonhole yourself as a dumb pipe. The second thing you really need to do, which is also part of the problem and the challenge, is how do I define my product set for the consumers and kill or substitute those products with the new products, and that means I have to decommission the old legacy network infrastructure, OSS, BSS, so I can move to this while I'm keeping my services profitable. How can I provide a substitution model on these services and capabilities, digital based on a monetization model, to substitute for the old and migrate? This space is an important space because many people ignore this. And if you ignore this, you are spending 60, 70% of your CapEx or OpEx on the old, and you're only unlocking 30%, and the pace, the digital pace that we're moving in is much faster, and you will not catch up. So this phase becomes very, very important. So I believe, and I will iterate, it's not a technology challenge to move to a software-defined infrastructure. It's really about taking the right steps, ensuring you're not locking yourself in, and most importantly, if you want to go through that entire journey, is to select the right partner. And that's how you will be able to go all the way through from ice harvesting to refrigerators. Thank you.